Welcome to this special episode of Friction Log. Hey Rick, how's it going? Hey Matt, welcome to Friction Log.
Hey. We're going to do a video
thanks for
version.
having me on. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to vote on inviting you, Matt, and I lost.
I'm surprised.
Split
I made it.
decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cesar has more electoral votes than I do.
Oh, no.
Oh, my state is a little bit bigger, so. Well, we want to welcome officially Matt, which was invited by both of us, to this interesting new experiment on hackathons. And it's also the first experiment of Friction Log through video. You can listen to our regular podcast at frictionlog.com and your favorite podcast player, Spotify, Apple. And today we're going to talk about how Matt and Rick participate in a hackathon, and they're going to bring all the experiences, including friction logs of tools, to share with us and for me to interview them. So Matt, welcome to Friction Log officially. Can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you know us?
Sure. So I know the both of you actually from Accelerator. We all worked there for quite a while. I know Rick from a little bit before that. We're actually cousins, so I've known Rick my entire life. First
Lucky
cousins.
you. Lucky you.
Yeah.
You have lived a privileged
real burden.
life, Matt.
Yeah. But I'm the head of design now at Pinpoint, which is where Rick actually works with me. So we're still coworkers. And yeah, that's where I'm from and how I know you guys.
Perfect. Yeah, we had good times in Accelerator, and then you guys are now in Pinpoint. So I'm sure that you have a lot of fun, plus the family. Rick, is this Matt, the cousin you married?
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact. Yes, in Boston.
Very interesting.
Can we not phrase it that way, please? Yeah.
Yes. True story. I did his wedding. Yes.
Yes.
I officiated his wedding.
I remember you telling me about it, and I was like, that sounds interesting. And we always talk about the English language versus Spanish and some of those things. That sounds weird in both of us.
Yeah.
All right.
Rick married his cousin.
Well, today we want to talk about hackathons. You guys were in a hackathon recently. You have some experience there. But let's start with the background on those. Have you guys participated in any past hackathons together or by yourselves? I'm going to start with you, Matt, our guest.
Yeah. So the most recent one I did before this one I just did with Rick was with another one of our coworkers that actually all worked with all of us at Accelerator, Chris Foley. We did an X Prize hackathon. They started getting into smaller prize things lately. And we actually won that, which was fantastic. 1,500 entrants, I think there were. And before that, the biggest one I'd say that I did was with Rick. We did the very first NASA International Space Apps Challenge. Quite a few years ago now. We got honorable mention overall. I think there were about 10,000 entries worldwide, but we got first place for the virtual location, which was about 1,500 entries. So we did pretty well in that one. Rick and I, we've always worked really well together, and it sort of shines when we work together as a team on hackathons. So
nice. Rick?
Well, the ones that Matt mentioned, and then, oh man, I got a bad memory. I don't remember. Palm Beach Tech did the first Palm Beach Tech hackathon, won that one, and I can't remember.
Battle Axe.
Oh yeah, the Wufoo one. I knew I was forgetting one. Yeah. So Chris Collier, when he worked at Wufoo, he did a API hackathon. They released their API and it's like, hey, build cool stuff and you can win a battle axe. So I won that, and I got a battle axe in my closet. Actually,
Should be on your wall.
I should display that right there.
Yeah,
shouldn't I?
yeah,
It would
yeah.
be
It
really
be on the
cool.
wall.
It would be good for the new office, yeah.
Yeah.
And we all
it's a good one.
participated in the Upsider Hackathon back in 2012, Code Strong. That was an interesting experience. It was an all night, so it was not the weekend. It was not a lot of hours. And the purpose of that was helping some charities, which I know, Matt, you have the list of some of those. You remember what those were?
Yeah. So the team I worked with was Mercy Corps, but we also had Michael J. Fox Foundation, Wounded Warrior, Special Olympics, and I think 4 or 5 additional ones. A lot of different charities. Yeah.
I do remember. Yeah.
I think, Cesar, you were in that hackathon, right? Because Matt and I, we helped organize that, and we ran that hackathon. But I think you were just starting at Accelerator, or not quite yet, or something, and then you were in that hackathon.
Yeah, that was like my third day that I officially joined Accelerator. I was working before with you, Rick, and with some other teams, but then I started working at Accelerator, and I was like, welcome. So Saturday, you're going to spend all night here, or it was Sunday night, I think. It was Sunday night, if I remember correctly, at the hotel. So it was nice. It was an interesting experience. And the whole reason of that was building mobile apps, so these charities were able to capture donations. So we had a bunch of SDKs, and I don't remember exactly how we did, but it was pretty straightforward. And I think we had some business partners helping, because I remember I worked with some partners back in the day, and we built something, and we finished at like 5, 6 a.m. So it was a nice experience. After that, with also some other friends from Accelerator, we joined a hackathon that it was sponsored by Hertz. And we actually call our team Hack It Until It Hurts. And they really like it. So
you won for the name.
We actually won Best Business Idea. So we have this idea of we didn't win the first prize, but it was kind of like the second, which still was like $5,000 or something like that between the 4 of us. It was a nice hackathon.
Good
It's hard for me to join other hackathons that are not close to that level. So if you're organizing one, if you want to give us $5,000, we will join. So, but that was an interesting one. So building kind of like experience for, like as a company, you sometimes have people, especially big companies, have the same people on the same cities. And what if they can share the car? So what does that mean for you as a company, and for you as Hertz to offer that service? So they gave us some APIs, and it was an interesting experience, I would say. NASA, XPRIZE, Battle Access. So hackathons, what are they about? Like, Rick, tell us a little bit. What is a hackathon for developers that may know that they exist, but they haven't joined one?
Well, I'll tell you what everybody else that's not a developer thinks of it, because every time I'm like, oh, I'm going to be busy this weekend. I'm doing a hackathon. Is that legal? You're allowed to do that? What?
Yep.
Every single time. So I don't know. Hackathons are about breaking the law and not getting caught. And
in a weekend.
Yeah, on a weekend. Yeah, right.
Fueled by Red Bull.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, there's all sorts of different hackathons. There's hackathons, like the Wufoo one is a good example, or even the Accelerator one, where that's a hackathon based around a technology to get developer awareness, to promote things around that technology or that product or whatever. So there's that. There's the charity type hackathons, which also Accelerator did. That's also what Palm Beach Tech does. They do the kind of hack for good kind of thing. And they're generally just competitions, fun competitions, where you sling a bunch of code together, collab with some people, and kind of exercise your creativity in whatever the subject matter is. That's what a hackathon is.
So you get a problem, and you get some set of rules, of course, about time, and then you get some technologies or some sponsors that are there, and they say, hey, if you use our tools in your idea, because it's a way to sponsor it as well, they give you something, or they have some, and it can be like cash prizes, or it can be just bragging rights and swag and stuff like that. So there are a lot of different prizes as well. There are first, second, and third place. There are honorable mentions as well, which it's always good because I have had experience on some honorable mentions where it's something that your idea was very focused or very narrow on something that it wasn't entirely about the rules, but it's like a recognition around that. So very interesting. And why, Matt, did you join hackathons? Like, why are you looking to participate on this one first and then the previous one?
Yeah. So I think that sort of as you go through your career, you grow in your career as a developer, it changes, right? When I was earlier in my career, I was probably doing a hackathon probably once a month. I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, pretty good tech scene there, especially for smaller stage startups. And it was literally like once a month we were doing hackathons, and it was to gain experience, to network and meet other people, get ideas of how people solve different problem sets. And it's really great for that sort of career building, early career growth. But then, as you get older, I've got a family now, I've got kids. It's sort of shifted a bit to, I like the problem solving aspect of it and exercising my brain, like Rick mentioned. But at the same time, it's got to be something that's going to be worthwhile to me. Either it's a good resume item or it's a good check, maybe, $5K or something like that. Because if I'm going to invest the time, I want to get something a bit more out of it than just networking. So it kind of shifts in, depends on where you're at in your career, really. But there's plenty of reasons to join and plenty of benefits to get out of a hackathon, no matter where you're at.
And I feel like there are also developers that go to hackathons and then they get noted because the idea is really good, and then they get funding and they create companies out of it. So I have seen incubators trying to perform those hackathons to motivate. So that's another thing. Rick, anything you want to add on why?
Why?
Yeah.
I joined hackathons because I want to win.
Okay. Competitive. Huh. Interesting. How's that going for you?
Don't ask.
I will ask, but later. Let's talk about this hackathon. You guys got together. It was a weekend. I guess it was a few weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah.
What was it about? Who was the organization that was organizing?
Yeah, so there's a group down here in South Florida called Palm Beach Tech. Actually, I think it's rebranding to South Florida Tech or something like that. I think. Anyway, so it's a nonprofit. It helps. They're trying to help promote tech and engineering and stuff like that in South Florida. And so every year they throw a hackathon for a few local charities, and they try to get engineers that are down here in South Florida together to work, together with whatever, doing hack stuff, breaking the law, but like everybody else thinks.
Okay, interesting. And they do this annually, or you have won that, and you also were a judge at some point, if I remember correctly, or you participate. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So what was this year about? What was the reason behind it, or what was the purpose of it?
So there was two charities. It was
the Bone Marrow Registry, and it was the South Florida chapter of Feeding America, which is like a food bank.
Yeah, okay. Feeding Florida or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So what was the problem you guys had to solve? Did you pick any of those two, or how does that like?
Yeah,
what
that's
happened?
A good question. So why don't we do this? Why don't I grab the PowerPoint slide and we'll just go through the presentation like we did to the judges, and we'll just do that. Does that work?
Yeah, that should be fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the team was called Good Archers. Why was that, Matt?
Yeah, so quick family history. One of our ancestors way back in the day went hunting with the King of England. And the king gave our ancestor all the good arrows because he said that our ancestor was the best of the archers. And within just a few minutes, our ancestor accidentally shot the king in the back, killed him, and then fled the country. So really good archer.
Yeah.
So that's sort of been the running joke between Rick and I for quite a while. The regicide in our family, so
Yeah.
can't escape it.
So if we ever invite you hunting, Cesar, beware.
Yeah, no arrows and okay, interesting. Let me make a note out of that.
Yeah.
Is that what you call like you put Bon Archer in your LinkedIn profiles and?
So that was what he actually said to our ancestor in French. Was that to the archer, the good archer go the good arrows?
Oh, so it was the French the issue. It was in English.
Maybe our ancestor was insulted he spoke French to him. I don't know. That's a good question.
We will never know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to the actual problem. So how does this work? How was the rules for this? You got two charities. You're supposed to build something for them. How do you start, Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, it was pretty vague. It was basically, here's the two charities. Go build whatever you think is most helpful. They sort of had a little bit of a focus on things related to COVID-19, the challenges that are facing the charities specifically because of COVID-19. How does a food bank work when you have a huge influx of people all of a sudden due to the unemployment? And that was pretty much the only rule. There was a time period. I think it was something like just maybe a little bit more than 24 hours, which was a little short for most hackathons. Usually it's like a 3-day thing. So that was a little odd. But it kept everyone focused, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, usually I would say you start on a Friday night and then you ended up presenting Sunday night. Something like that is what I have seen.
Yeah. So we had like the intro and the icebreaker and all that on the Friday night, but we actually weren't allowed to start coding until something like 8:00 the next morning. And I think on Saturday, and then the deadline was like 8:00 in the morning on Sunday. So.
Okay. But it's also not, I mean, maybe for a competition it's big, but I remember back in my previous company, we organized hackathons internally for the development team to try to get that feeling of solutioning and stuff like that. And we'll do like 1 or 2 days, and like it can be any length as long as you compress the problem and the rules and what you're expecting to what the time you're giving to developers. So, okay. All right. Let's start with I guess you have some slides. That's what you presented to the judges.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is our presentation. We had, I think, 4 minutes. So it was pretty short, and we'll keep it short for everybody that's watching this as well. So yeah, you got the team name in the introduction. We can skip that. I think we've been through all that. And we briefly sort of mentioned some of the tech stack there at the bottom of the slide. But we decided that we were going to work on the Feeding America South Florida chapter and their problem. And the problem that we saw after just a little bit of research is that a lot of food goes to waste in the United States every year. I mean, we're talking 140 billion pounds or something like that. There you go. 133 billion pounds of food is thrown away each and every year in America. And that's a bunch. That's actually 30 to 40% of all the food that America produces as a country each year. So, I mean, massive amounts of waste, right? And if you want to put that into dollar figures, $218 billion that's just being tossed out. And about 60 billion of that is just from businesses like grocery stores. And the interesting thing is they actually have to pay money to dispose of this food, right? So they're paying money to dispose of food instead of giving that to these charities that could be giving it back out to people that are in need. And the even worse thing about that is a lot of these food banks are actually paying money to get food to then distribute. So there's this huge disconnect, right? And our idea was essentially, well, what if you could take the grocery store, the Publix or the Costco or whatever it may be, and connect them with the local food bank, Feeding South Florida or whoever the local chapter is, and connect them up together and have, initially it was sort of like an auction style thing, but really we sort of just turned into a, claim for pickup type scenario. And with that, I mean, I guess we could probably just jump right into the app and Rick can demo it for us.
And for our viewers that are not from the US, 133 billion pounds is like 60 billion kilos that the rest of the world uses. Hey, I have gone through so many things with the metric and the imperial system here that I need to do that translation every time. I was like, 133, that looks like 60 something. Okay, good. All right. Who's up for the demo? Rick, is that you?
All right. Yeah. So I got two browsers open up here, and the reason why I had two, one on the left, one on the right, is because we actually have two personas in the hackathon entry we did. On the left browser is the distributor or the provider's persona. That's their view. And on the right is the food bank, or the one that's trying to get the food. That's that persona. So I have two up here. And the reason I have two up here, you'll see in a minute, because we do some real-time stuff. And it's nice to demo it side by side so you can see stuff happening real time. And I'm logged in as two different users. Obviously one's the food bank, one's the grocery store or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
All right, cool. So on the left side, we've got the grocery or the restaurant or whatever the view is, the provider. And it shows their inventory that is up available for others to pick.
So that's my surplus, right? That's the food that I don't want or need, or it's gonna go bad. Okay.
Exactly. I'm getting ready to throw away, 20 gallons of dairy, and then I can add that to the inventory. And actually, you'll notice here on the right hand side, you'll notice that 20 gallons of dairy just showed up. So I'm adding the inventory. And then as the food bank people are saying, hey, I'm going to pick up that dairy, you'll see here, hey, Fish Rules Donation nonprofit is coming to pick up the dairy. So you can see it, real time. The provider goes, oh, okay, somebody went ahead and took it off the shelf for me, then they'll be there. And we'll show you in a minute that it'll let you know when they're going to be there and all that kind of stuff. But
so it will do it automatically in a way that this is food and people are hunting for them, meaning these organizations will be hunting for them in this scenario. So you want to provide that feedback to say, oh, this is not available anymore for anybody else. That's why it's important, right?
Yeah, the way we were envisioning it is kind of like almost like a real-time trading platform where things are happening real time. And the reason why we think real time makes sense in this case is because what we read in our quick, short research for the hackathon was that when there are food banks paired with providers, that as soon as that food gets placed, is made available, it's less than an hour that it's gone. So it's pretty fast. So in our head, we're thinking, oh, what if it was like a real time thing? Thinking about being in a big city, you have all this food and all this. You have actual people full-time driving around picking up food for food banks. So that kind of made sense, that real-time nature.
Yeah, it's the economies of scale, right? If it's a little town with 3 restaurants and 2 food banks, then they can call each other. It's fine. It's like, oh, I'll pick it up in, I don't know, an hour and a half. But if it's a city and you don't know everybody, and that makes sense. Okay, good.
Exactly. So that's pretty much it on the left. That's I'll show you a couple other things here in a minute. On the right, which is the food bank side, what they see is not inventory of one, but any of the suppliers. So this Publix 459 actually is Matt, his user, and then all these Jupiter is my user here on the left that you see in this browser. And then you can see the inventory for each location, and you can filter by it. So if I wanted to look just for dairy, or I wanted to look just for fruit, for example, now I only see this place that has fruit. So you can kind of multi-filter if you want to and all that. And then when you're ready, you can say, okay, I need this, and I'm going to grab this grain and this vegetable too. And again, you'll notice everything's real time on the provider or the supplier on the left. It's all changing and all that kind of stuff. So now I have inventory in my basket, and now I'm ready to go dispatch, to go pick it up. And so when you dispatch, you click this little truck thing, opens up a map, and you get turn-by-turn directions on the best route to get there. And you can actually dive into the real specific ones, the specific turns and stuff like that. And then we didn't get to this part, but the on my way button here on the right, what we wanted to do is you could say on my way, and it would send the route, kind of sort of the ETA and all that, to the supplier, so that the supplier knows when they're going to be there. And one last thing I didn't show. You see these presence indicators here. So if I wanted to actually call all these to tell them that, oh, I'm actually going to be late, or hey, you didn't leave the door unlocked last time, or whatever it is, you can actually click on this and it'll start a real-time video chat. Click allow. I got to allow SRAT incognito mode on this browser. And then it'll use the video camera here. And if nobody's else on the other side, I guess, then that person will come up and then you can have a conversation with them. So we did add that too. Yeah,
so I don't have to worry about like publishing my phone number or like any information. It's all within the platform. And then, of course, there are things that you got to do, like if you have the dairy or the fruits and vegetables that are in the fridge, you probably don't want the food banks coming all the way into the restaurant to pick it up. You probably want to put it aside. So knowing that ETA makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything, Matt, on the general problem we were trying to solve?
I think that's about it. Yeah, you covered it well. A little bit longer than the 2.5 minutes you took last time. That's fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cesar, we had 4 minutes to present. So Matt got 2 minutes, or 2.5 minutes.
A minute 30. Yeah.
Is that what it was? A minute 30 is what?
I got a minute 30. You got 2:30. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like rush.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because every hackathon has that. Obviously, it's part of the rules, right. But 4 minutes seems, and it was a remote hackathon, so like if you're on mute for 10 seconds.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that had technical issues, and they were not very forgiving. And you know how it is, I'm sure from experience. When they say it's a 5-minute presentation or whatever, they'll let you wrap up. They'll let you go to 6 minutes or something like that before they start booting you off the stage. Not this one. It was 4 minutes. A bell went off, and you were cut. You were done. So it was a pretty good rush.
Yeah, I kind of appreciated that though. I like that because otherwise, if you don't do that, then this guy got 6 minutes, but this guy got 4 minutes. Yeah, because that guy that got 4 minutes was boring, and this guy or whatever, whatever it was, they were very consistent, which I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give them credit for that for sure. If you're going to have a time rule, at least enforce it fairly and accurately. And I think it's also worth noting too that we went first, so we weren't sure how mean they were going to be about that cutoff, but they were strict. So.
Yep. The good news is we basically got our demo done. The only thing is I was clicking on that video thing as the timer went off, so I didn't get to talk about the video, but the video still popped up. So. Whatever.
Good. I like it. This seems to be a very interesting way to solve the problem with nothing that we don't know that it exists, right? So real time and maps and video communication. It's just applying on the right context that gives it that twist that can help one of these charities. All right, that was a good demo, guys. Congratulations. I mean, for a day, this seems like you were able to integrate different technologies. It's a good design. I mean, it's simple, very intuitive. You know what's going on. I like it. If I was to work on any of these sites, I will definitely look for something like that. Growing up for me was wasting food was not an option, meaning when you are born and raised in the Mexican culture, you don't waste water, you don't waste food, and this kind of thing is sometimes, like living in the US, sometimes you see a lot of food wasted, and you see a lot of restaurants that just throw it out, and as you said, they're even paying for somebody to get rid of it. Not to mention like the insane amounts of food that Costco or Sam's Club or some of those guys sell, and that there is no way, not even like big families are gonna go through like 4 gallons of milk in a week before they go bad. So it's good that the idea and the actual execution of the hackathon is trying to address the problem as opposed to just doing this imaginary thing of, oh, what if we, I don't know, make robots that take the food to the banks or something like that? Because you see those kind of things in hackathons. So it's good that you were obviously it's not your first hackathon. You know the game. You know that when you go to a real value, that's what matters and what people like. And I'm sure a lot of people that watch this like that. But I want to see what the judges actually ask you guys. Like, did you have any specific questions, or because you as a judge you wanna drill in, you wanna figure out like what's behind it, what's motivating this thing, can it scale or not, and what is your vision? What did the judges ask you guys about this? And I want to start with Matt. You seem like you have a poker face there.
Yeah. I would like to preface it with, we thought our 4 minutes was short. I think they gave the judges 2 minutes to ask questions. And again, we went first, so they didn't even really have a baseline for what kind of questions to ask. I think the only question we did get from a judge was essentially, how are we doing authentication? Which, quick and easy, we just told them, we're just using Google through Firebase. So that used up the whole entirety of the 2 minutes, essentially. And that was the only question we got from the judges. Okay.
Any feedback, Rick, or anything else that they say apart from that one question?
I don't think so. I think that was it.
Well, let me flip it a little bit. If you were a judge of this project, what kind of feedback have you sent back to them, like to the presenters? Do you have any questions? Do you have that's a curveball, right?
Yeah, because it was my hackathon project, so I'm a little biased.
Yeah.
You've always got to ask first, is this actually working, right? Like,
Yeah,
is this live or is this fake? I think that
Yeah.
should always be the first one, just to get you a baseline.
Because there are some in hackathons, there are teams that have, I have seen hackathons where there is just business people. And for some reason in their team, they don't have a developer. And they either go with a no-code kind of thing tool, or they just go through the idea as a presentation. I have seen crazy PowerPoints animated just to simulate what an app would do, like a prototype and stuff like that. So that is a good question. You want to know like how functional this is, because in the hackathon you kind of like want to get it to the point where it's like, obviously it's not ready to launch, but it is like how close you go to that MVP, right? To that initial functionality. Sure. So that's a good one. Any other questions you guys think should be asked?
Put me on the spot. Yeah, I mean, usually I would start asking, because it's a hackathon, right? So it's technical. So I would start asking about the stack or approach, or like in the case of a nonprofit one, there's whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, there's always an idea that maybe the nonprofit could use this somehow. So I would usually ask questions to see, like, well, if this were to be completed by, to its end, what are the roadblocks, or what are the, I would ask questions like that. Again, regardless if that's actually a good sentiment for a hackathon or not, but that would probably be something I'd think about.
It is a good point, because as like if you're this charity or you're like somebody that it doesn't clearly, I mean, they don't usually have money to spend on things like this. And you come to them and you say, oh, this hackathon. And one of the questions that I would ask is, how much will they pay to run this? Right? That's because you're thinking on the actual organization. If you come up with the stack that says, oh, you got to spun up like 10 VMs on AWS and they're really expensive, and like it's going to cost you like $2,000 a month, then they're going to be like, no, thanks. Like
we built it with an Oracle database and we got a $300,000 contract due tomorrow. Yeah, it's not going to work.
Well, that's a really good point, though, because, I've done a lot of hackathons, and more as time has gone on, you see that they focus on partnering with these charities. And honestly, like most of the apps, the vast majority never actually get used by the charities, right? For a multitude of reasons. So asking how realistic it is, this would be picked up by the charity, I think is a really good direction to go on the questioning. That's a really good one.
Good. All right, so I have in my notes that you got a perfect score from one judge? Like, tell me a little bit about scoring. Like, do you guys know what kind of rules were around that? And I'm gonna get to what place you got, but
You don't have
what was
to.
your what was your baseline of like what are they
So
trying to evaluate?
they had a rubric, which it was actually it's a good rubric. It's overall value. They had impact about the problem was a big problem. What were you solving? Functionality, viability, innovation, design, and teamwork. So those were their judging criterias.
It's pretty good criteria.
Criterion. Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
it.
the categories were good.
Yeah. So what place did you guys get? I'm gonna say by your faces, not the first one.
not first, second, third.
I'm gonna
mention superlative. Nothing. We didn't. We were a no-show on the
on the board. Okay, that happens. Yeah. Not because I mean not because one way or the other, right? You never know. I remember.
Well, you remember you mentioned about sometimes hackathons have PowerPoints. So there was a couple teams that did that, flowcharts and PowerPoints, and they scored higher than us. So
okay,
there's that.
Yeah, I think it was one of those situations where really we went first, and recency is king when you're talking about judging, right? Especially when you have like 20 different hackathon teams or something like that. So I think that by the time that they sort of got to the end, maybe they just kind of forgot a little bit about the details of what we had done compared to everybody else. And I think maybe sort of the criteria for the judging and the way that they were scoring it had shifted a bit as other entries that started to be seen by the judges. It sort of resets the curve of the grading, right? So I think that kind of played a bit of it.
They definitely didn't have any chance to normalize the scores because I think the judging, they deliberated for less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You're evaluating like 1, 2, 3, 5, and then at some point you're in project 15. You got to rebalance your baseline, right? Who's doing what, how technical they are, and if they didn't have the time, then you're in the wrong spot to be the first one. Because if you were the last one, then I mean, everybody else is the baseline, and you're bringing your own tool. Okay, so who won?
So the first place team got, what did they do? They built like it's kind of like this. Like this part right here where you see like the map and the directions and stuff. So they built, I don't know, Matt, I know you looked at the repo, like a backend server that takes a CSV file and does this on a map or something.
Yeah, you can upload a CSV file with a list of all the locations that the driver needs to go to pick up food or drop off food, either way. So you upload a spreadsheet and it will it pings some service that would basically solve the traveling salesman problem for you, and then spit back a Google map route just like this, and then it would text that to the drivers.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. It seems like something that Google already does. Like you put a set of directions. Yeah,
and that's what we're doing, right? In ours right here, if you do that, if you click the logistics thing, we just give it the waypoints for the different locations, and then it solves it for you, right? And again, even those the two guys that got first place, they used a third-party service actually to do the routing part, and then fed that into Google. So
okay, well, it is what it is. So it's interesting because, I mean, I have seen hackathons where one little feature that the judges identified with tend to be the one that wins, and the more they highlight that one, like I remember in the Hertz hackathon, somebody used a specific set of APIs that we chose to ignore, and like it was like you have the Hertz APIs, you have like Nokia, you have like all these sponsors APIs, and you have keys to use all of them, and you get a pick, right? You had a minimum of 2 or 3, and then we pick, 5 out of the 6 or 7. And the one team that won was using that one API that we just didn't think it was really useful because we were thinking on saving money.
Right.
Like our goals were, how do we use these APIs to save money? And we got best business idea, which to me that seems like that's first place, right? That is the one that hurts as a sponsor want to pick it up, right? I want to offer this thing, and we got a prize, and it was nice, and it was a nice experience. But I did notice that it was like, oh, you guys focus on this one API, which is the one that one of the judges was a VP on that company, and you start to connect the dots, and you're like, okay, it's interesting. At the end of the day, it's all people.
Selfie segment, hasn't it?
Yeah, right.
But very good. I mean, nice entry, nice problem, very nice solution. Thank you guys for sharing it in this stream. And like any other event or any other media that we create in Friction Log, we gotta talk about frictions and delights and blockers. Let's get to a mini friction log across all the different technologies. And we saw one of those, maybe like 4 or 5 in the initial presentation. But then also, Matt, you mentioned that you look at other teams' repo, which means you guys had to open source this, right? I guess it was part of the rules that you have to publish it. Okay, so why don't we start with the actual code? Rick, you want to walk us through what you guys have?
Yeah, sure. So first thing is you can go to the URL. I'm sure we'll put it in the video link. You can go to this repo and check it out. It's MIT licensed, so you can use anything in it. But it kind of goes through and describes the why, the what, and then specifically the how, which is I think what we're going to talk about now, is kind of our tech stack. So we use Vercel for deployment. So we're deploying on Vercel. And we're using Tailwind for the CSS framework. NextJS is the React framework that we're using. Room service is what's doing the real-time stuff. So all that real-time stuff you saw go left and right and all that stuff, rather than having to set up, the WebSocket server and doing some kind of WebRTC or something like that with leader election and all that kind of thing. Room service, it literally gives you React hooks, and you just kind of like save it to an array or save it to an object, and it figures out all that CRDT, conflict free resolution data types or whatever that's called, CRDT stuff. It does all that for you.
I would just like to add that it's really magic. It was just a real fun thing to watch happen and how easy it was. And Rick, we're sort of working in parallel on this. Rick's doing some of the back endy type stuff like that, where I'm working on the front end. And he's like, all right, I'm going to start on this real-time stuff. And I was expecting him to be gone for a couple hours. And 5 minutes later, he's like, got it working. Here it is. Check it out. It's really cool. So
yeah, it was really ridiculous. Yeah, because now, especially for me, maybe this is back to the friction and delight and all that kind of stuff that we do in the podcast. At work, we're building this real-time notebook for collaboration and stuff for developers. And so we have a server set up, a WebRTC server that communicates over WebSockets, and we're using Prisma. What's it called? Prosmir. Thank you. Prosmir for the editor, and then we take all that document structure and we send that to the WebRTC server. When you connect, I guess it picks a leader, and so we're syncing that peer to peer. But anyway, I'm getting too technical. But we have to set up all that stuff, and then we're using YDoc? Yeah, YDoc to do the syncing of the data types, of the data structures and stuff like that. So it's a lot of work. But at work we need to use that because of a lot of different reasons. So when I started working on it here in the hackathon, I'm like, oh my word, we're not going to have enough time to set up real-time stuff. And roomservice.dev was actually, it's in our list of friction logs to do.
Oh yeah, we're going to do a deep dive. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's in our list. I'm like, well, shoot, let me just try it. And it just worked in minutes. This is mind blowing. Very cool. So anyway, yeah, we're using that. We're using Firebase to store some preferences and stuff, and then also authentication. And for the hackathon, we just did Gmail authentication. It was easy enough. So we just did that. And the map flyout that you saw, rather than Google Maps, we use MapBox because it looks nicer, it's cooler. And then for that little video chats that pop up, that's daily.co, which is a new service that we found out about at work actually recently. So decided to try that out too. So that's the tech stack. The repo also kind of tells you how to run the whole thing. I mean, like you can literally go through this whole thing and run it yourself. In fact, if you click this handy dandy deploy on Vercel, it'll actually open up Vercel if you're logged in with your account, and it'll get everything ready to go. It points to the repo, and then it knows based on this button, it knows all of these environment variables that's required to run it. So it's really cool what Vercel does. It pops up a form that says, fill out these environment variables. So as long as you have these things, you go get them and just drop them in, the app will just run. It'll deploy on your thing and just run. So literally you can get this run in less than 5 minutes.
Do you get a copy, like, does it fork it to a repository of your own or
yeah.
Like, okay. So you get a copy of the code and then Vercel automatically does the fork and then the deploy. That's nice. Yeah. Okay. Good. Repository stack. Interesting set of stacks. Some things that we have talked about, and if you want to learn more about it, you can go to the website and read some of the friction logs, or even some of the podcast episodes. They have things like Tailwind and NextJS and Vercel, but there are some that are not there. So. I guess any friction log talks about the persona. We also call it the logger from time to time. Now we know you, like we know like the last 20, 30, 40 minutes have been around knowing the experience, the context, what were you looking, and of course trying, you were not limited by technologies, which means you were able to use some that you already know and also experiment with new ones because that's part of the hackathon experience. So we know the persona, we know the why you use it. So let's talk about the actual friction or the friction log. I know you guys don't have any specific set of a record or like the logs that we actually record and publish on the website, but you are going to remember some things out of this. It's fairly fresh. So being our guest in this special episode, Matt, why don't we start with you? I understand that it was the first time that you used TailwindCSS, and that was probably because Rick told you to do it.
That might be actually true.
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. But tell me, we have 3 sections, Matt. So we have delights, right? Things that you find it really interesting, that it just worked like magic, like you were saying about the roomservice.dev. There are frictions, so things that made you stop at some point and you kind of like say, oh, okay, I got to do this, or I got to Google this, or go to the docs, or maybe using the docs or some of those things. And there are blockers. The blockers were things that either because of the time that you had, lack of documentation, we have had blockers where, for example, the application crashes if we're analyzing an IDE or something like that. That's a blocker. That's technically I cannot continue. So we have those 3. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the good stuff, the delights?
Yeah, we'll just go in the order you presented. I think it's fine. So yeah, like you said, it was my first time using Tailwind. You know, obviously I've known about it for a long time. I've been following Steve Shoger and Adam for quite a while on Twitter and everything else. So kind of hard to avoid them these days in the front end community. But yeah, you know, it was a good opportunity. Like you said, you know, this is Hackathon's the time to go and experiment and try out new things. So I figured why not just dive head first into it. And the fact that Rick made me do it, just obviously had no choice. So delights, you know, I've always sort of defaulted to Bootstrap. I don't use the utilities a whole lot in Bootstrap. You know, the Bootstrap CSS utility framework, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, I really have always relied heavily on the grid part of Bootstrap. And because of that, you know, if there is something I need to do a modal or tooltip or whatever, I'll just go ahead and use the Bootstrap component for that. So I kind of came into this with that as a baseline. And, looking at the docs the first time for Tailwind, it seemed a little bit overwhelming compared to Bootstrap, just because there's so much there. But I was really surprised how quick I was able to get up to speed on it. It was very little upstart time trying to understand the docs and all that. And the great thing about it is there's a big community around it. I think there's a bigger community around Tailwind than there is around Bootstrap, even though Bootstrap's been around for quite a while longer. So there's a bunch of different websites where you can just see the different components that people have built. And you look at a component that's similar to what you want, and you can just grok it almost instantaneously because it's so clear the way that they've used the class names and everything else. It's really simple. And I think it'd be really good too for people who are just sort of starting out the front end. I know that that was sort of the goal that they had originally with all this was making front end design easier on us developers that don't tend to have an eye for design. So I think they achieved that really well. Yeah. So frictions, again, coming from Bootstrap, and I think there's some other libraries that do this really well too. Moment.js has really good documentation. Bootstrap has really good documentation. That was probably the one friction point for me. It's just sort of the Tailwind documentation. It's really segmented out. So you want to put in this type of button or whatever, but there's all these different options. There are actually different pages that you have to go to. So you can't just do a long scroll, and you can't do a Command F or whatever it is. So there's quite a bit of clicking around trying to discover the different parts, especially as somebody that's not used it before and I don't know quite what I'm looking for. It was a bit harder than I think it needed to be. And I kept kind of complaining about that to Rick and having to ask Rick, what is it that I'm looking for? What's the thing I need to be searching for? What page is it on? So that was probably the only friction, really. And as far as blocker goes, no blockers. Like I said, I was up and running on it and very comfortable with it probably within an hour. And I think the app turned out well, and we finished the app on time for the hackathon, so all good.
Yeah. That sounds like a very good result. Usually a blocker in a hackathon means that you guys haven't finished, and obviously you did. So I want to pick up a little bit on the fact that you said the community. I think the Bootstrap community is still larger, but it is quiet and less active. And I feel like the Tailwind community is much more active, and it's more like, hey, look what I built. And it's like the new tool, right? The new standard for a while. And this is the same community that has evolved all the way back from like jQuery. And then everybody starts to move out of it into like Bootstrap or something like that. And then the jQuery community, you know that there are a lot of developers that still use it, but nobody wants to say it publicly. So I feel like
even Bootstrap does, right? Or at least maybe they moved off of it, but I don't know. I have to go. Don't quote me on that.
Well, I know developers. I know Bootstrap developers that use Bootstrap 3 that they don't want to talk about it, but they are stuck in that they don't want to move to 4, and they don't want to talk about it publicly, but they still go to Stack Overflow, but we'll see it on the survey because that's where everybody confesses. The documentation, I agree with you. I started with Tailwind a few months ago now, but yes, it is. And one of the things about the search is that sometimes it will send you straight to like migration or like an implementation, not precisely the docs. So there is no separation between just the documentation or how do I find how to put a margin or a padding or something like that versus like longer implementation stuff. It's one search. And the other thing that trips me a little bit is it has the memory of what you like. It keeps the last thing that you search, which 20% of the time is useful, but the other 80, I want to search for something else. Like I already went through that. So that's two things that I noticed recently. So, but I think you as a new user, I probably got used to it too much, and I didn't think until you mentioned what you were going through. So that's very interesting. Tailwind as opposed to Bootstrap and less. Firebase. Who wants to talk about Firebase?
Hey, really quick, Cesar, I just pulled up our friction log on Tailwind, and actually what Matt is talking about, we did actually have a friction log on that where, although I think how we labeled it is slightly different, but we said the sidebar and the documentation, it felt daunting. And, actually,
exactly.
the word we used was, a little bit of FOMO, a little bit of fear of missing out, a little bit of anxiety, because you get there and you're like, oh, what is all this stuff? What am I missing from this documentation that I need to know? Because it can't be just this one thing. I need to know this and that and the other. So we did actually log that, which I think is funny.
It's like if you're learning CSS and you know that margin exists, but padding doesn't. And it's like, you can still make everything. It's just going to be way harder. But like technically, you can still make everything, and you're just going to, and then somebody's going to come and tell you, oh, you should use padding here. And you're like, oh, I can do that?
That happened a couple times. Like I said, I was starting to do something. I'm like, this feels like it should be easier. And I would ask Rick, he's like, oh yeah, just use this other component. Or, look at this doc for this other thing. And I was like, oh man, that's 10 times easier. Mm-hmm. So it certainly happened a couple times throughout. It's almost like, they've got like the main nav items, and then they have all the sub nav pages. If they just got rid of all the sub nav ones and made it just one big page, I think that would probably solve the problem as a new user. So
yeah, that would be an interesting approach. Okay, good. Anything else you want to talk about Tailwind? No? Firebase?
I think we're good on Fire. Yeah, onto Firebase, Rick. All you.
Firebase. Well, I mean, I've been here. I'll just open up the code and we can talk through some of it while I. So, I mean, I've been using Firebase for years. We use it with fish rules, like my other company, Fish Rules. So we use that extensively, and we're doing terabytes of bandwidth and all sorts of stuff on it. So I'm very familiar with it. So as far as persona goes, very familiar with it. So I didn't have any problem. In the app itself, you can jump into data Firebase.js to see what we did really quick. Oh, really quick, side note. I thought when we started this hackathon and this project, I thought, I'm not going to use TypeScript. I'm just going to use JavaScript because it'll, it's quick and dirty and scrappy and faster. I'm not actually convinced it was faster. I think it would have been faster if I used TypeScript, partly because I'm so familiar with it. I literally code in it every day, but also so many times it was like waiting for the browser, even though it's hot reloads fast. It's just like, I've got to wait for the browser to run the thing to let me know if I actually did something wrong. Whereas as you're typing in the browser or in VS Code with TypeScript, before you even hit save on it. So anyway, total side note.
I'll second that. I was one of those, I'm more of a front end UI type developer. So, when we started switching to TypeScript at work, I was a bit resistant to it. I wasn't super happy about it, but yeah, it's Rick asked at the beginning of this, do we want to use TypeScript or not? And my, default position was no, but I think we probably should have. It made our lives easier. So I think from this point on, TypeScript all the way.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because so I haven't used TypeScript that much, and I still kind of like prefer JavaScript, but I started to see some of those games. But I see the point of Matt where like I did Java 10 years ago, and like having all that type safetiness, and the moment that you start jumping into TypeScript, that's how it feels. And but now that you mentioned, like, we should go all in on TypeScript, like, if any of you two want to sign up to migrate the Friction Log website to TypeScript, that can be another thing.
Oh, that's right. We have an outstanding to do that, actually. I don't know why I started that. I don't know. Why did we start that and not TypeScript? I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know. It's Rick's. Yeah, it's Rick's fault.
It is. It's my fault.
Everything's Rick's fault. Yeah.
Okay, Firebase.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. So Firebase, we use it for authentication, and we use it to store. Well, here I'll just jump over to the Firebase database. We have the Firestore, which is their NoSQL database. Mm-hmm. We store information about the account. So remember, we had like the supplier, and then we had the food bank. Mm-hmm. So we store like the address of the supplier. That's how we know how to route you in that map that slid over. And then the company name, and then the type, the company type. And the reason why we store the company type is because if I go to settings here, so you can toggle between private business and food bank. So that's what we're doing. We're just storing account preferences there. along with the authentication. So again, like if I go back here and I log out and I log back in as fish rules, boom. So there, I'm logged back in as fish rules. So we handle that kind of thing. And it's all done in one file. It's this Firebase.js file. So if whoever's watching, if they're forking the library and checking it out, you can get everything in there. Again, if you just provide those environment variables that are in the README, then everything will connect and work as is. But it's pretty straightforward. You got your standard login function, which we go to that Firestore doc and grab a couple things. And then I created a couple hooks, like this is the use user hook. Where do I use that at? So like use user, I get it for making sure the user's logged in. If the user's logged in, we show you this navigation and that kind of thing. So without diving into too much detail, that's what that hook's for. It's just to get the user data. And it's to get it in the nice new React hook way. So there's a couple hooks in there, but that's it really. I mean, it's pretty simple, straightforward. Just getting the user data and then handling the login. And that's it.
Yep. Good separation of concerns of having it in its own file. So, okay. The lights, I guess, know the lights because you have been using it for a while. You know what you're getting into.
The delight is it worked as I expected it to, and it got us there really quick. Because that's the thing, right? In a hackathon, you asked earlier about, as a judge, what would we ask? And then Matt mentioned first thing is it working? How much of it is working? And that's important. And what's nice is with this project, we have authentication, and then user account metadata, and it saves to a database back in the back end and stuff. So it's fully functioning that way, which is important.
And it's also like Firebase is, I mean, you in fish rules, you pay a lot because of the bandwidth, right? You're probably one of the 10 users that pay for Firebase, but everybody else uses it for small projects where the free plan will suffice for a lot of the use case, food banks included, right? If you're starting with this, the free plan will probably get you there. So,
yep.
Okay. Roomservice.dev, I want to say. We, like, I already hear a lot of delights about it. You want any frictions, any blockers? Like,
So there was one friction. I'm going to go ahead and open it. So just so you see how it works from the code perspective. So they have these hooks. Here's your room service React library that you see up here. Yeah. And they have use map, use array, and maybe one more, I can't remember, and then use presence. So like for the map, like we have this map of all that stuff, the inventory, who's checked it out. We store all that in a map or an object or a hash map, depending on what language you're familiar with. A dictionary. So we store all that in one giant hash map, and then we go through and we look it up and do stuff. So in room service, what we do is we just say, hey, this data that we're dealing with is a map, and we're going to play, if you will, because they kind of pitch it as like it's a multiplayer thing, which is what you would call this feature, just like you would call Figma live cursors. It's multiplayer is what that is. So you say, what's the room? So in our case, we just, because it's a hackathon, we just have one room called main room. And this is the name of the map, board inventory. So then you have a reference to the map, and then you have a way to set the map, reset the map. And so we're like in the supplier board. I'll just jump to that real quick. Where are we setting that at? Yeah, so we just go through when you add inventory. This is the inventory function. We're adding the inventory, and all we're literally doing is just saying, hey, this new inventory, go set it. Boom. And it saves it. When you call that set board map, it saves it, sends it up there, does the conflict resolution of the data types and stuff, and then you get it back down. Everybody gets it at the same time, like you saw in the demo where things were updating. That's it. It's so easy to do. So that's a delight. Awesome. I mean, it's literally that easy. what we couldn't get working was this use presence. It works sometimes, but it didn't work all the time. And so what we were trying to do, remember the green, I'll have to remember, go here real quick. This right here, this little shiny thing. What we wanted to do is if you were online, show green. If you weren't, we show red or yellow or something like that. And we got it working. You can see it here, and it's like if the user's logged in, then we set our online status and we set the name and the display name and all that. And sometimes it would work, but then other times nothing would come back from the service, which is weird because use map, there's and use array, and that all works great in the app. But for some reason, use presence just arbitrarily didn't work. So that was a blocker. So we ended up, it's still in the app, but we didn't really highlight it that much because it intermittently worked.
Okay. That's interesting. Do you think it was a bug or it was something that you don't know, or?
It's a hackathon, so we didn't have time to troubleshoot it. I think, Matt, you had narrowed it down to maybe it was because I was demoing on my machine. I think you had noticed some irregularities there.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff came down to the fact that like Rick was logged in to two different browsers in two different logins, two different personas, and trying to play them at the same time because we could only demo from the one computer. So just like in this, you had them side by side. And so basically you're just talking to the same IP or whatever it was, the same user in the same room through room service. And so that led to a couple of problems. We'll talk about it a little bit with Daily as well.
Okay.
So I think that might have just been something related to how we were setting it up for the demo.
Yeah. I mean, you're in a non-standard scenario because you don't have two computers one side by side where you can actually.
Correct.
Okay. Good. I look forward for that deep dive on delights, frictions, and blockers. So we can talk about it in the podcast. And Matt, maybe you can join us, and that will be an interesting follow-up to this one for our non-video listeners, I guess. Okay, daily.com. You guys said that you found it like recently at work. You were doing some research or something. You found it. What's the story with daily.co? CO?
Yes, I don't actually know the origin story of why we found it at our day job. I think it was just kind of trying to replace the text support, the usual chat bubble that's down in the corner on websites these days. We wanted something a bit better than that at work. So our go-to-market marketing, customer team, I believe brought it up as an option. And the thing that I think initially pulled us all into it, it was the whole, click here, copy paste this one line of code, and it just works out of the box, right? And anytime somebody says, hey, one line of code and you can get like this pretty cool feature, that's like an immediate, light bulb going off when you're working on a hackathon of, cool, this will take me 5 minutes to integrate and get me a lot of wow for the judge.
It's video, it's boys, it's things that sell. Okay.
Exactly, right. True to their marketing, I dropped the one line of code in and it did just work. It took all of 5 minutes to get it in there, get it running, have Rick get it running on his local and test it out real fast, and just worked perfectly. The one sort of friction that kind of turned into a bit of a blocker was, it's really simple to just drop it in and get a room going where people can chat with each other. But obviously, you don't want just one general room in the use case that we had, right? We don't want all the grocery stores and all the food banks in the same room. We're trying to connect one, driver to one supplier, essentially. And so we need to make private rooms. And as soon as you want to do that, you have to integrate with their REST API and create a private room, and then get that back, and then change, init the new chat window and everything else. So it became much more complicated. I mean, it's still simple, fairly, right? But it's not one line of code anymore. And we were getting into the waning hours of Hackathon. This is 2:00 in the morning at this point. So, I think that we would have done the one-on-one chat room. We would have gone the extra step further if it was a little bit easier. The way that they do it is it sort of all runs off of the script tag for the one-liner, right? And you just put your account ID and then like a generic room title. If they could just make it so that you could like pass a unique ID, just change the script tag with the unique ID, problem solved. Like I don't want to have to go through a REST API to make this this unique ID for a room or whatever. Just let me do it in my app, supply it to you and connect us. I think and maybe I missed it somewhere in the documentation because again, it's 2:00 in the morning, waiting hours of the hackathon, but that's completely possible. But it seemed like from, the quick and dirty searches that it could have been a lot simpler. And so again, it turned into a bit of a blocker. So we just sort of, I guess you could say, faked it a little bit for the demo.
So it's one, like, if I was to use the app while you two were using it, and we'll end up in the same room.
Yeah, it was one big public room, essentially, yeah.
Okay. Which, I mean, it's fair game, right? You still get the wow, and if the judges ask in their 2 minutes, then it's a fair question to say, hey, we have it partially, but other than that, it's fair game. Okay, good. Daily, MapBox, last but not least.
So MapBox, we use that on this screen. This is the MapBox stuff. And then they have these different modules, and one of them is the navigation routing module, which is what we used for the turn-by-turn best route direction thingy.
So you're not using any Google APIs. It's just MapBox, the UI and the APIs that they provide?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think MapBox looks a little better. Plus, because it's not Google Maps, it stands out. It's like, Google Maps is awesome. It's not. I'm not trying to poo-poo Google Maps, but when you're trying to do something showy, flashy, and somebody sees something that is slightly different like this, it stands out. So yeah. But it's a good experience. It's like using Google Maps API and stuff like that. Their modular approach to things. Well, here, let's just find it. Let's go to the map view here. They have MapBox GL. So I was using the GL library at MapBox, and then you have to. Now this is a Friction actually. You see how I'm doing these weird imports inside of this function? Mm-hmm. There's some oddities that they need to fix on some of these libraries, but this is the only way I could get it to work. Actually, I spent a lot of time on this stupid function.
That's a Friction.
Yep. And only because I was trying to figure out how to import these things the right way. So, but what's cool is I like how it's modular like this, so you can kind of pick and choose what you want. So I'm like, I want forward geocoding. Let me go grab that package. I want this. Let me go grab that package. And you kind of have to, build those features together, which is what we did. So you can see like the geocoding waypoints. We use that, and then they have this MapBox geo directions module. And so once I had all those modules there, I figured out how it worked. It was easy to just drop it in drop the map in, and then drop in the waypoints. So it's pretty simple. I think the biggest friction was just this weird way of importing inside of a function. It's very odd.
Okay. Very nice, guys. Any other comments? Any frictions? Anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, for the people that, if they're going to download this repo and play with it, just ping us if you got questions. Of course, I would say, it's pretty straightforward, but it's somebody else's code. Yeah, right. It doesn't matter how good your README is; it's still somebody else's code. So, if you want to play with it or you want to learn something about it or whatever, just ping us, and happy to, walk through it.
I'd like to add that, I think that we used a lot of different tools and services, and we basically start to finish, I think, only had about 18 hours of working time. And to integrate all the different things that we did to the degree that we did, fully functioning for the most part, minus a couple of hiccups here and there, I think really just goes to show how well the tooling that's available and the products that are available these days. Because, doing Hackathon 5 years ago, no way, no how would you have gotten this much done, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everything's so plug and play, one line, drop it in, configure it super duper quick and everything. It's really great. And I think we did a good job picking the sort of products and features that we want to integrate with. And because it was very, very simple and hassle-free and quick.
Yep, and you learned a lot, and you had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think there's always a win, even if you don't actually win the hackathon itself. But you always win. You meet people, you learn about technologies, and then you look back a few days after, weeks after, and you say, no, we did a lot of stuff in 18 hours. So that's always a good feeling. And for anybody that it is watching and haven't really tried a hackathon before, there are tons of them with a lot of different causes that you can join. And if we ever find some that we want to share, we're going to do it on the Friction Log Twitter. So I want to thank you guys to walk us through it. I know it is about remembering a lot of stuff, and some of those things are now working. So the code fixes itself. So that's pretty good. I want to thank you, Matt, for joining us. Rick and I have to be here. Like, he has to be here. He doesn't get a choice, but you do.
Every week.
Every week.
Rick said he was going to fire me from the day job if I didn't show up.
So, but I want to thank you to walk us through to join the Friction Log and to try to follow the same standards. Glad you had a good experience, and hopefully we get some good feedback out of this video cast or live Friction Log, and we can make more about different things, and we hope to have you again soon.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Rick, thank you very much. I'll talk to you in our next podcast. I guess we're coming close to episode 11. We should call it season 2.
Oh, I like that. Do that. Yeah. Chapter 2.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Right. Thanks, guys. Yeah. See ya.
Thanks.